our mandate is to build the number one games and esports company. I told our vice chair, His Royal Highness Prince Faisal, I said, this is my orientation, and I'm going to come here and we're going to hit the ground running. It's going to be me and 3 or 4 people from the MENA team. Yes, we will be recruiting and trying to hire people, but I'm not going to spend any significant amount of time worrying about org design, policies, structure, and so forth, because we need to put points on the board, to use a different analogy. And he said, okay, great. Now, to my great surprise, and I'm very grateful for this, that I think resonated very well with His Royal Highness, our chair, the Crown Prince, who of course encourages, enables, and empowers people to do the seemingly impossible on seemingly impossible timelines. And so the fact that we went out and transacted for the first year and a half at Savvy and got a lot of deals done and put points on the board and began generating revenue, I think was a good thing.
Super exciting times that we live in. I know that the country has invested heavily in the space of gaming. Tell me about your journey of, what brought you initially to Saudi to where you have been asked to head Saudi Games, a very exciting sector.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mo. First of all, thank you for having me on your show. Enjoy your show. Just recently watched the episode with Her Royal Highness Princess Rima, who's a true inspiration. Of course, I work very fortunate to have her brother, His Royal Highness Prince Faisal, as our vice chair at Savvy. But to answer your question, I've spent 29 years in the video game business. I was a lawyer for a long time, but I'm fully recovered. I'm okay now from that experience. And I ran my own company after leaving Activision Blizzard in 2012. I had my own development company working with state government lotteries. Did that for several years and was looking for actually a really more interesting and challenging opportunity to come back into what I consider to be the real games business. And was very fortunate to have been part of a team that built world's largest game studio at EA back 25 years ago, and then the world's largest publisher at Activision. I was looking for something, if possible, that would be sort of a third act. And when this opportunity came up in 2021 during COVID, I was aware of the PIF, I was aware of Vision 30, but it's very difficult to know what that means until you dig into it a little bit more and see it for yourself, in my opinion. And I thought, well, this is very interesting. This is a games initiative that's unlike any other in our industry over the last 4 decades. It sounds a bit like Tencent being a passive investor. I quickly learned that was not the case, and that this was meant to be a much different company that had existed in our industry. And I was attracted by the fact that, first of all, it was a challenge that had been unmet in our industry. Nobody's tried to do all of the things that we're doing at Savvy all at the same time. So that was one thing, very big challenge. Second, a lot of commitment and to the initiative from what I could see at the time, not just in capital, but in actual, we are going to do this. We're going to build Saudi Arabia into being a global hub for games and esports. Commitment from the very top of the house with His Royal Highness. So that gave me some assurance that this would be something that would be, sustained for a long period of time. And then what really clinched it for me was coming here to Riyadh for the very first time during the interview process. We were basically through that. I hadn't met with His Royal Highness yet, but and after about 3 days on the ground in Riyadh, I realized, okay, I get it now. Vision 2030 is this very, very serious thing. Everybody in the kingdom has signed up to this initiative. I told friends back home, it's very refreshing to come to a place where it felt like all the horses were pulling in the same direction towards the same set of long-term goals. And it was very exciting. And then I really began to think, okay, well, this is a great challenge. This is the sort of challenge I was looking for. There's great commitment to it. And on top of those two things, here's a chance to help, under the auspices of Vision 2030, help some people try and transform their country in ways that I thought were very positive. And that was the clincher for me.
We're moving beyond, using our past to propel, sharing our culture, nature, heritage, hospitality, progress with the rest of the world. Welcome to our future. Welcome to Saudia, built on big ideas and a passion for change, inspired by heritage and progress, made by dreams and determination. We exemplify it all. Come find your place in it, with us. Our future starts now. Saudia. This is how we fly.
Remember the Fox interview that His Royal Highness did about 6 months ago or so, maybe closer to a year. I loved towards the end when he asked him, what do you do for fun? How do you blow off steam? And, he could have said maybe something that would be more, he kept it real. He could have said, I work out, I swim, some of the more acceptable answers that you hear from people who are heads of states. He said, I play video games.
Yes.
And it was so honest and raw. I'm sure when you saw that, you were like, what, I'm glad he said that.
Oh, we were so happy. It's the truth. I mean, he is a very serious and enthusiastic gamer and very passionate about our sector and esports, which is reflected in his leadership and how he's enabled us, among many other parties in the kingdom, to pursue all these games and esports initiatives. But yes, we were all absolutely delighted.
I knew that Saudis, Middle Easterns at large, I'd say, were obsessed with games. FIFA, I think, is probably one that jumps off the page. You wouldn't go to a friend's house on any given night without a game of FIFA happening somewhere. When you see the love that we have for games, and you see the events now that are being hosted in the esports world, and the funds to back this sector, what does it tell you about realization of passion and where they want to take this? It's like, okay, I see you guys love this. Why don't we up it up a notch and really own that space, not just on the MENA region, but on a global level? What does it tell you?
It tells me that leadership under His Royal Highness is very, very forward-looking. So the fact that Vision 2030 is the diversification of the economy into 13 industrial sectors and away from petrochemicals, and that entertainment is one of those 13, and that, as some people will know, but I suspect there's still a lot of people don't know, that games is by far the biggest part of entertainment now, shows how forward-thinking leadership under His Royal Highness is in respect of building the kingdom into a powerhouse for the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I sometimes say Vision 2030 is like a bullet train to the future. And that's the way it feels to me. I mean, it's the pace of transformation in the country from a Westerner's perspective is astonishing.
Mm-hmm.
And it really does feel very, very future oriented. It's not rooted in anything that's sort of legacy.
Mm-hmm. We live in a world today where people can make careers out of games. This wasn't the case when I was growing up in the early 90s. It was frowned upon. Like, if I'm playing games, my dad would be like, can you stop wasting your time? Go read a book. You'll never make money off that. I'd have to take that comment. Today, I can't say that to my 7-year-old.
It's true. I would never have imagined when I started, even never mind when I started almost 30 years ago, even 15 years ago, I wouldn't have imagined that you could make a living off of competitive playing of games. Of course, you can make money in the games industry in a variety of jobs, and has grown enormously. But to make a living off the playing of games, no, I wouldn't have really imagined that. That's been a phenomenal development.
Not only that, Brian, I mean, I catch my son watching YouTube clips of people playing games.
Mm-hmm.
So not only are people making money off the games that they play in competitions and various other elements, but of them uploading content onto YouTube that then people are watching. People are watching the Fortnite players. People are watching, some of the top FIFA players in the world off YouTube streams.
This is one of the most astonishing things is the number of hours watched of competitive play or video game oriented content, more so than the actual playing of games in terms of hours spent.
What would you say is one of the top qualities or skills that youngsters can gain from playing games? Like if we have parents watching right now who are still not convinced, money isn't everything. Okay. What skills can my kid develop from the gaming industry?
Well, I think there's two parts to my answer on that, Mo. One is, let's go back to when we were all children and to human evolution. Play is how we learn. Playing games from very young age is how we learn to interact with our siblings and with friends. We learn how to collaborate. We learn the rules of certain games, so we learn how to fit within the context of the activity. And we learn how to govern ourselves in that activity, being a good sportsmanship, if you like. So all of these fundamental elements of learning and education and socialization, which have existed in playing of games since the beginning of humanity, are the same things that apply in electronic or digital games or video games. Same principles. And what we saw during COVID, I think in particular, when we were all in lockdown, was the importance of socialization and community building in games. So it was very acute during COVID. Some children, were suffering as a result of not being able to see their schoolmates. But they had social community and social interaction, and that health benefit, it's really a mental health benefit that comes from playing games.
Remember when I was growing up playing PlayStation 1 and 2, we were never able to communicate with people through the device.
It was single player.
It was. And I was going to say that doesn't do much to help social skills or any child who might be autistic. And now when my son's playing, he is a different person when he's on it, but he's also speaking to 3 or 4 people at the same time. They're not just talking about the game when they're playing it. They're talking about what their weekend plans are going to be. They're communicating through the device. So it has changed a lot in the last 2 decades in terms of those people 20 years ago saying, well, it's killing their social skills. But actually, it's changed a lot. Today, they're a lot more social on it than they ever have been.
Exactly. It was all single player back in the day. And yes, you could go to a person's house and play with them, but it wasn't social. It wasn't multiplayer and online changed everything. And now it's completely flipped. And multiplayer and online and community building that's the essential part of gaming today. And the core successful element of free-to-play live services games is the fact that the communities are what keep people coming back to the games that they love week after week, month after month, and year after year. It's not because the game is so amazingly fabulous that you want to play it for 10 years. I mean, maybe it's a good game, but your community of friends that you've built up around that activity is the important thing.
So we spoke about how much has changed in the last 10 or 20. What do you think it'll look like 2040, 2050?
If you'd asked me that 20 years ago, I don't think I would have. I think it would have been possible to give a good answer with respect to what we just mentioned, multiplayer and online play. But
VR excites me.
VR is exciting. It's still, I think, hampered in a couple of ways, in my opinion. One is the kit is still pretty expensive for most people, and that was part of the problem. I don't know about problem, but not everybody in the old days could afford a console or to afford to upgrade a console every few years. And now with the mobile phone, anybody can play a game because they have that device anyway. So that's the reason. That's the primary reason there are 3.4 billion gamers on the planet. There are only 200 million consoles out there, but there are 3.2 billion people playing on a mobile phone.
It's almost 1 in every 2.
Yeah, exactly. So VR is hampered a little bit by the cost of the hardware. And also, it's not very social,
Mm.
if you think about it.
True.
So I think that's to the community part of it. There's still a lot of opportunity there.
Challenges or threats to the industry. What do you see out there that could be a challenge for you going forwards as far as the industry is concerned?
That's a great question.
Anything worry you?
Not anything existential, I would say. There are always challenges with respect to macroeconomics. I think we have firmly disproven that games as an industry is recession proof. That's not the case. So I think, economic conditions do affect short-term outlook. They certainly affect employment in the industry, which is troubling. We've gone through a period now of some significant layoffs post-COVID, and that's very troubling as companies try to right size for demand, essentially. There are occasionally geopolitical bumps. Chinese companies having trouble getting licenses in their domestic market, having trouble making further inroads into American or Western markets, and so on. But nothing that I see as really like long-term existential risk.
Mm-hmm. I always wondered, why are we still using CDs? The other day I told my son, it's like, back in the day, we used to have tapes and Betamax and VHSs. And even not too long ago, we had CDs. You know what a CD is? He's like, Baba, do you not know how much I love my PlayStation? I'm like, of course, yeah, PlayStation is still CDs. Yes. So it's no longer there in the music world, but it is there in the video games world.
Yeah.
Always wondered.
Well, it's, not everything can be online. Not all online is latency free. There's significant value to having something on a medium that is immediately playable and where the quality is assured, and the play experience is robust. But yes, we've gone from when I started 8-bit cartridge to a 16-bit cartridge to a 32-bit CD to 650 megabit, and then to a 54, eventually to a 54 gig, Blu-ray disc.
So the first one, are we talking Sega Genesis?
Sega Genesis, yeah.
And then the Nintendo.
Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. Yeah. And it cost about, to make one of those, to make a version of the game for Sega Genesis or Super Nintendo back when I started was about $60,000.
$60,000.
$60,000.
Adjusted for inflation?
I don't know what that would be adjusted for inflation.
We'll fact check it and we'll.
But that'll be, I would say that's probably around $100,000, $120,000 or something like that.
Wow.
And now, $400, $500, $600 million for titles like Call of Duty.
It's crazy how it's changed. Hilal Football Club.
Yes.
Stroke of genius.
That was His Royal Highness's stroke of genius.
It's the number one team in Asia.
Yes.
Top 10 team in the world. Hilali fans, don't get pissed off at me if it's top 5. But so much brand equity there.
Yes.
So much love for that team.
Yes.
Putting Savvy as a main sponsor on the shirt told a lot of people about who Savvy is for the first time. What have you seen from that partnership?
That's a great question, Mo. So
I love my football.
And it was, it was part of obviously the Kingdom's and PIF's investment into the SPL, because it wasn't obviously just Hilal who benefited. CAFT is a sponsor of
Nasser.
We're sitting in this beautiful CAF space, so I need to call them out because they're my landlord, both residential and commercial. And but it really did give us an opportunity for name recognition. So the challenge, Mo, was, and as we discussed 15 months ago, after a year, maybe a year and a half of sponsorship, everybody knew who Savvy was, but not a lot of people knew what Savvy does. So we spent a lot of 2024 getting the message out, both domestically and internationally, around what do we stand for? What do we really do? What is our mandate? What are our short and medium and long-term goals? So hopefully people both in the kingdom and outside, certainly in our industry, they know who we are, but more broadly, hopefully have a better understanding of Savvy and what we do and what we're hoping to achieve for the industry.
I love the commercialization of sports. I think it's profound what happened in the last 20 years. As a marketing background, I even like it more when there's a connection between the brand and the sport.
Yes.
So Savvy is by no means disconnected to the sport. I'm thinking FIFA, I'm thinking players. Do you ever collaborate with some of the players in any of the FIFA game initiatives?
Yes, we have. We've begun to do more of that in this season, I would say. And I think there'll be much more as we go forward. And as your viewers might know, the inaugural Olympic Esports Games will be held here in Riyadh.
Yep.
We'll be a big part of that.
When's that going to be?
It'll likely be in 2027.
Okay.
I don't think firm decision has been made. And that gives us a further opportunity to engage with, athletes.
So you're
both esports athletes and traditional sport athletes.
So Savvy's in it for the long haul as far as sports commercialization ventures are concerned.
Oh my gosh, yes. And particularly so on the esports side. And this was the theory when we acquired, the very first thing we did, the very first board meeting of Savvy in November of 2021, we sought approval to make an offer to acquire ESL and Faceit and combine them to create the world's #1 esports events operator and broadcaster of live esports events. And we obtained that permission from His Royal Highness and the board in that very first board meeting and made a binding offer 60 days later. So very, very quickly on the theory that, and with the viewpoint that we were in a different position than any other player in the marketplace. So esports, particularly 2 or 3 years ago, very fragmented space, nobody making any money. Almost all operators are still unprofitable. Very small revenue generation, but huge engagement, huge audience engagement, fan engagement, but not properly monetized. Everybody in the space, either a VC, a private equity firm, or a listed company, or a startup, all of which have like 3 to 5 year time horizons. And my pitch to His Royal Highness and the board was, we are in a different position as Savvy, thanks to the long dated patient capital of the PIF. And we can think 7 or 10 years or 10 years plus into the future. And in esports, which was very fragmented, and we thought there would be a lot of consolidation, we thought we could lead that so long as we weren't constrained or too restricted by short-term views of quarterly earnings or year-to-year, profit metrics or whatever. If we could take a longer-term view towards our investment, we could really uplift the sector. That was our pitch, and that and that was accepted.
Fantastic. I'm getting the gist that you really love what you do.
I do. I come from a long background of in entertainment, mostly music. So when I switched careers from law to this, that's what I was really looking for, was the intersection. This is back in the early 90s, intersection of entertainment and technology.
Mm-hmm.
And to my surprise, that intersection back then was games. So I'm delighted to be where I am.
Any specific achievements throughout your career that you're most proud of?
I think what I'm most proud of is, and what's been most interesting in this journey is, everything is, every 6 months, there's something new. I sometimes joke that, I was a lawyer before. In law, something changes every 300 years. And in games, something changes every 6 months, and you have to reinvent what you're doing or how you're doing it. And so this opportunity for reinvention or starting something new or rapid evolution and iteration is very exciting. And what I'm most proud of in the journey that I've been fortunate to have is to have been a part of or leading the building of great teams that have gone on to achieve great things. When I was at Electronic Arts, my very first job in this industry, I started at a studio of EA that made FIFA, actually made all of the EA Sports products except Madden, plus Need for Speed. only 110 people at that time. We grew that in 4 years to be 800 people, became the largest video game studio in the world. Then after a couple of years at Microsoft, I went to Activision, and I was fortunate to lead worldwide studios there, and I had an opportunity to build other great teams, and we tripled the size of the studio organization from 6 to 17 studios and quadrupled revenue and overtook EA as number one publisher in the space. So being able to hire great people and see them come together as a team and then go off and do great things. I mean, those teams at Activision won. When I was there, those studio teams won 300 Game of the Year awards and over 1,400 Editor Choice and Outstanding Achievement awards. So, I mean, these people are doing amazing things, and to be a part of that is really fulfilling.
What's your favorite game of all time?
Haha, that's a great question. Well, I was a massively wicked Space Invaders player back in the 80s.
Oh, wow. Well, that's one of the first
that
hits.
was one of the first arcade games.
Yeah. Classic.
So that always makes me laugh when I think about those days. And then I loved and still have a great love for the Need for Speed days at Electronic Arts, because I'm a bit of a car guy, and my job was to go out and acquire all of those manufacturers and cars for Need for Speed, license them in. So you couldn't ask for a better job, going around to every car place in Europe and every track and whatnot. So I loved that. And it was one of the few games I was actually good at as a player. And then in the last few years on mobile, one of Scopely's games, Tri-Peak Solitaire, has been one of the games I just pick up to sort of tune out and relax.
Before I get into Scopely, I have to ask you, sorry for going off script, top 3 favorite cars of all time. I probably only ask, and my team probably know this, because I'm a car guy as well.
I see.
And I know how tough that question is. Please take all the time you need. And then I'll give you mine.
Well, the 3 cars I said many, many years ago I would own at some point was don't ask me why. Well, I think if you go back into the 90s, it was a pretty desirable car. The original Boxster S, which I think won Sports Car of the Year like 2 or 3 years in a row, whatever. That was a favorite of mine back then.
We'll put a picture up of that on YouTube.
I still have one, actually. The Series 2 E-Type Jaguar.
60s, 70s?
Yeah, 60s up to 68, I think. You know, I think the 60, if I'm not mistaken, the 1962 Jaguar E-Type is the only car that's been in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And my third pick would be the mid-60s Stingray from Corvette.
Wow. All 3 are a vibe and a half. You know, they resto mod the Jaguars. A cousin of mine resto modded his in the UK. Preserves everything from the outside, but inside you're talking wireless Bluetooth,
Wow.
Harman Kardon speakers, completely changed engine, start button. So you preserve everything from the outside, but from the inside it's current.
And suspension and drivetrain and everything upgraded?
Everything, yeah.
That's amazing.
It's literally just the shell.
Because that's the problem with those old cars. I mean, the Corvette, it went like a rocket in a straight line, but handled like a coal cart.
That's if it starts. So my uncle, my dad's, my mom's brother was gracious enough to pass on to me his college car, 5,000 original miles, 1970 Pontiac Trans Am.
Yeah.
Blue with white stripes.
Yeah.
I have no business caretaking for it. Although he did. If my living room was bigger, I'd put it in there. Not because of the humidity in Jeddah, just because it deserves to be preserved. So the problem is with that car is that it doesn't start more often than it does.
Really?
Yes.
Huh. The American cars weren't usually notorious for that.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Maybe the heat in the country doesn't help.
Oh, maybe.
But I garage keep it and all, and I'll service it, and it just came out of service, and I tried to start it for the second, so it started the first time. Second time I tried to start it, it wouldn't crank.
That's a bit nuts.
So, I mean, that's going back to, resto modding. And I think that's one of the best things where you can just, push start and off you go.
Yeah.
Mine would be the 1967 Shelby AC Cobra.
Oh, yeah. Amazing.
That one. Gray with light gray stripes.
Uh-huh.
I'm crazy. An early Bronco.
Oh,
Resto modded.
interesting choice.
That would probably be my number one, because Saudi, you probably need an SUV. That'll be my number one.
Yes.
And number three, something more modern in respect to those two cars, which will be a Hummer H1. Now, all three cars are completely different.
Yeah.
But I think that will be my top three cars.
Yeah. I have trouble picking modern ones. There's so many great ones. That's my problem. So I tend to default to the historical choices. But
all my three cars were pre-2000s, and so was yours. Something to said about the 60s and 70s era, maybe specifically 70s. That was, I think, the highest point for car designs.
Yes, exactly. From a design perspective, people weren't concerned with aerodynamics. It was beauty.
Yeah.
The
even Chevy jumped in on the Chevelle, which is just a piece of art.
Yeah.
Pontiac, of course, the old the Mustangs as well.
I've had all those cars.
I forgot we're supposed to be speaking about gaming.
جديد. اكسر الروتين مع أطباقنا الجديدة من بيتزا هات جدة. بيتزا هات جدة، ذوق طعم الثقة معنا.
We did a bit of research on Scopely. You obviously acquired them. Savi acquired them. How has that panned out since the acquisition? How happy are you with that move?
Extremely happy. I say my prayers every night to Walter, Javier, and Tim for and the Scopelians for success. It's a bit of a joke, but we are very, very, very grateful. It was a combination of hard work and good timing and a bit of good luck. So they've basically tripled the size of the company since we acquired it. And most of that has been due to the outstanding success of Monopoly Go, which is number one mobile game outside of China right now, and the most successful mobile game launch of all time.
Monopoly, huh?
Monopoly Go, yeah. And I think, I think in a nutshell, the key success factor of Monopoly Go is not only is it a great game, and there's a super interesting story about the development of that game that took 7 years. And that is an astonishingly interesting story from my perspective, because the number of times that they could have done something different, shipped the game where it would have met its objectives, or kill the game because it wasn't performing. They didn't think it was going to be as good as it ought to be. But they didn't, and they reinvested and doubled down as just like as a games executive, having been in many of those meetings and facing decisions like that, to make counterintuitive decisions like that and be able to convince your board of those decisions 3 times, not once, twice, but 3 times, to end up where they did is a testament to how great the Scopelians and the leadership of that company are. But it's also based on a massively iconic historical IP, Monopoly, the board game. And it's true, I think, in a few isolated cases, that if you have a really, really great game based on an iconic IP that is well known, you can have a super outsized result. And that's what's happened with Monopoly Go.
Amazing.
But we were lucky. We knew what some of the soft launch data was on Monopoly Go out of the Nordic countries as we were negotiating the deal. 1 week after we signed, they launched it sort of in America and more broadly. And then it took off from there. So that's the good luck part is the timing. But yeah, super happy.
What about Steer Studios? How has that relationship blossomed over the past few years?
Yannick Teller and his team have done an amazing job of taking raw talent, mostly Saudis, and building a true game studio with a true games culture. I'm astonished, actually, when I see evidence of how successful the culture is that they've built just 1 floor above us here in CAFT. And they've won many awards for their culture and best place to work, which is a testament to how hard they've worked on culture and values. And not all of that was easy, because in one sense, it's difficult to get people here adapted to how flat in hierarchy the games industry is. Games companies are very flat hierarchy. And a lot of junior people have a very strong voice, especially in the creative process in studios. And Saudi is a very hierarchical culture, and the business culture is very hierarchical. Junior people are not used to having such a strong voice. And so to be able to meld these two has been a remarkable achievement on behalf of Steer. And so what have we got? Maybe 65% Saudis, which will grow to probably 80 plus at peak. 25 to 30% female participation in the workforce in Steer, which is by any studio measure anywhere in the world, that's an astonishing number of women. And they've got two titles launched now, two hyper casual mobile games launched, and they're working on a console project. So one of the hardest things to do in games is building a studio from scratch. Not very many companies are good at it, but Ubisoft, as one of the major publishers, has historically been good at that. And that's where Yannick and some of his leadership team come from, and it's showing.
What about your management style, Brian? Are you more hierarchical or more horizontal?
No, I think I'm more horizontal. I mean, I'm very, I think I'm down to earth person. I try to be approachable. We had a meeting in the office yesterday with a number of managers, and I was reflecting on when I first came here, when I walked into a room at the company or walked into the floor, off the elevator, people would stand up and call me Mr. Brian or whatever. And I was like, no, please do not stand up. Do not call me Mr. Brian. And, I think, from my point of view, I've always appreciated working for leaders who made themselves accessible, or relatable, at least. I mean, it's hard to be accessible all the time if you're traveling and you're this and that, but at least relatable, approachable, and to the greatest extent that you can, interested in people's problems, because it's not a very top-down driven industry. That style of company organization in our industry has kind of been the past. EA was very good at this top-down structure from worldwide studios down to the studio organization, partly because of the very charismatic and capable leadership they had in worldwide studios at the time I was there. But when I moved to Activision, the model at Activision was very autonomous and independent, so very flat. And that has, over the last 20 years, become the predominant sort of model of organizing a games company with numerous studios or business units. And so if you're operating in that way with a lot of independence and autonomy, you've almost by definition got a very flat hierarchy.
I would imagine you get a lot of applicants, Saudi applicants, who want to join your team.
Oh my gosh, Steer, when they first opened up, I think one of the first LinkedIn job posts they made was for 7 positions. This was a long time ago now, 2 years ago. And I'm just trying to remember. I think in the first 24 hours for those 7 positions, they had 1,500 applicants. And I asked Yannick, I said, okay, some people would have applied for more than one job. So how many uniques were those? Oh, he said 800 and something uniques. I said, well, how many are qualified roughly? And he said, probably half that number, probably 375 or 400, something like that. But he said the astonishing thing were how many Saudis had applied from overseas. They were working in the games business at some other company and saw this opportunity to come home, which was really gratifying.
I see that a lot, by the way. My banking friends who were in Singapore and New York and in Hong Kong, 90% of them are in CAF today.
Wow.
Lawyers who were in Canary Wharf in Lower Manhattan, they're here today.
Fantastic.
Who else? But yeah, bankers and lawyers, a lot of them who, graduated Ivy League, worked 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
A cousin of mine has been in Hong Kong for 15 years. He's back here now.
That experience, I think, that international experience is essential, I think, for the successful fulfillment of Vision 2030.
What's funny is that their colleagues in those respective countries are probably looking for jobs in Saudi as well. So who are you, Mr. Saudi, not to want to, But yeah, exciting times. Words of wisdom for you to pass to, the generation entering the workforce now. You carry a lot of experience and a lot of wisdom from your years in the workforce. What's a message that you'd like to pass on to them, those who are trying to find themselves and trying to find their career path?
Oh boy, that's a great question. I don't know if it's wisdom so much as just plain old experience, but there is some benefit to experience for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think something I would tell my daughters who are 19 and 21 is the experience I had when I was in my default career was lawyer. My parents told me I have to go to university. Once I got to university, I realized I needed 2 degrees really to get where I wanted to get in life. I didn't know what that second degree would be, but it turned out that I was okay at law. So I went to law school. Then, you practice law. And for several years, I thought about leaving. But I would say one piece of advice is don't be constrained in your thinking of what's possible. Because I was a trial lawyer. I was doing insurance defense work. I was not a corporate lawyer. And after a while, of course, all my friends were lawyers because nobody else could put up with the hours that we all work. And they all said, look, they said 2 things. You can never do anything else. You're a trial lawyer. Only people who can go into business are corporate lawyers. And you will never make more money than you make now. Most of those things were patently false. And yet I constrained myself with that thinking and not having the confidence, I guess, to, especially early on in my career. And when you're early in your career, you can take some risks and you can try something different. Once I convinced myself of making the change, I thought the worst thing that can happen is I go back to practicing law. Like, why not? And so I would say, take risks early on in your career. Don't be constrained by what other people think, and try and develop that confidence and that deep belief, and really look and examine. And it took me 2 years to do this, Mo, as to how the skills that you are developing in what you are doing now or what you've studied are transferable or translatable to what you think you want to do. And maybe it's a 2-step or 3-step process. Maybe it's not overnight. I go from here to there, but there are every job we have involves skill development, and many of those skills are transferable. And really pay attention to that, because once I figured out that unlock, that really helped me make the transition from being a trial lawyer to being a video game guy. And the other thing I would say as a piece of advice just about career, generally speaking, was probably one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, which when I interviewed at EA for that first studio job, I went through 26 interviews. Yeah, 15 in California and 11 in Canada, and where I was based in Vancouver. And for some reason, I was just a director level guy job. It's not like senior job or anything, but one of the founders of EA interviewed me. And he gave me a piece of advice that I've followed ever since. He said, okay, you're going into a new function, working for these guys in this studio. It's a brand new thing that we're starting up that you're going to lead. Your inclination will be to figure out, okay, what should the design of this function be? What should the org structure be? What should the team look like? Maybe we need some policies drafted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to spend a lot of time. Your inclination is going to be spending a lot of time thinking about that. He said, don't do any of that. He said, go up there, get your line in the water and catch some fish right away. You can worry about the boat and the crew and the nets and the technology later. And I did that in that job. And in the first 90 days had some achievements or whatever that they were happy about. And I've followed that ever since in every job. And even when I came here to Savvy in Riyadh, I told our vice chair, His Royal Highness Prince Faisal, I said, this is my orientation. And I'm going to come here and we're going to hit the ground running. It's going to be me and 3 or 4 people from the MENA team. Yes, we will be recruiting and trying to hire people, but I'm not going to spend any significant amount of time worrying about org design, policies, structure, and so forth, because we need to put points on the board, to use a different analogy. And he said, okay, great. Now, to my great surprise, and I'm very grateful for this, that I think resonated very well with His Royal Highness, our chair, the Crown Prince, who, of course, encourages, enables, and empowers people to do the seemingly impossible on seemingly impossible timelines. And so the fact that we went out and transacted for the first year and a half at Savvy and got a lot of deals done and put points on the board and began generating revenue, I think was a good thing. Now, yes, we did have to pause a year and a half ago and say, okay, now we need to put in place all the proper governance and hire more people, et cetera, et cetera. That was the right thing to do. But that's the other thing is, get your line in the water and catch some fish.
Biggest challenge in your career? I know we spoke earlier, but just that kind of time frame and pressure, the mission that you were on, hit the ground running, you say, put the line in the water. Was that your biggest life challenge, you think, to deliver?
I don't think that's the biggest challenge. I think one challenge that's always been somewhat annoying, and it comes with changing from, say, being a trial lawyer to being, doing what seemingly unorthodox things, is being pigeonholed. You're a lawyer. People think, okay, that's what you can do. You're a lawyer. That's it. That's all you can do. Then you go from that to being leading business affairs, doing deals, licensing IP and stuff. Okay, that's all you can do. You can't be a studio guy. So how do you get to be a studio guy? Because you're pigeonholed here. Then you become a studio guy, and then that's all you can do. You can't become a corporate leader. Then when you're a corporate leader, it's like, constantly people sort of viewing you through a certain lens, and learning how to sort of overcome and first of all, be adaptable enough to make these changes. But then secondly, being having enough emotional intelligence, I guess, and social awareness and self-awareness to figure out how to sort of sell yourself as capable in these changes.
Yeah. The next months and years, what can we expect to see out of Savi's camp? Give us the scoop. Or a scoop. What kind of touch points, or what are you looking forward to the most, let's say?
Well, our mandate is to build the number one games and esports company. And that would traditionally be measured by revenue. We are number 8 today, up from number 11 a year ago. So we are close behind some great companies, Epic, Valve, and then of course Electronic Arts and Tencent and so on. So we are on a mission to get to number 1. It is doable, and it will be achieved. That's what I'm most excited about. But of course, how we get there is, that's where all the hard work comes in. We're already the number 1 esports company by a country mile. So I'll sort of divide up my answer to make it a little more coherent for your viewers. But on the esports side, we are the number 1 operator of esports. We have probably a 40% market share of esports. And I think half the viewership of esports worldwide and 35% of all esports hours watched worldwide come through our platforms in our company. And of course, we had the honor of operating successfully the Esports World Cup here in Riyadh last year. We will do so again this year and for the next several years under the amazing vision, leadership, encouragement, enablement of His Royal Highness. Saudi Arabia is clearly the leader in esports worldwide, like no question now. After 2 years of Gamers 8 and 1 year of Esports World Cup, and more or less on the eve of Olympic esports.
Who was the leader? Who was the leader prior to Saudi's?
There was no leader in esports.
Fragmented?
Esports was it was very fragmented. Publishers really didn't pay attention to it because there was this two prevailing views. One is esports was run by somebody else who was making money off your IP. Number 1. Number 2, it's kind of a marketing thing. Yeah, we get some people interested in our game, maybe they'll buy the game. So publishers have sort of been in and out according to the economic strengths or weaknesses of their position from time to time in esports. None of the operators who were independent were profitable and financially strong enough to really elevate the sector to the level of F1 or the Olympics or the World Cup. And that's part of our objective, is to get esports in terms of its production quality, et cetera, all the way up to that level. And under the vision and guidance and leadership of His Royal Highness, we are faster along that path, and further along that path, I should say, than I would have imagined 2 years ago, by a country mile, I would say. Part of it is also due to the National Games and Esports strategy unveiled by His Royal Highness a year and a half ago, maybe. The only country on the planet that has a national strategy for our sector. That's very forward looking.
Yeah.
That is very forward looking because these are jobs, these are skills, these are talents that are developed in esports and games that are technology and data driven in our digital life, which has now existed for 30 some years. That is the future. So in esports, I think it's a tremendously exciting future for Savvy and the kingdom. On the game side, we will make further investments. Hopefully we'll do something in the next few months that will be very well received in terms of another acquisition of a games company. And then we'll continue on that path and try to, amass more genre leading titles to drive additional revenue and returns for our shareholder and hopefully get to that number one position.
It must be amazing for you, refreshing to be empowered by the top, where you're not dealing with, you're literally, you have all the support that you can imagine. Makes your job easier.
I wouldn't have come here if it weren't for His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, being our chair and His Royal Highness, Prince Faisal, being our vice chair, because both of them are avid gamers. They are avid esports enthusiasts, but most importantly, they understand not only the products, because they play the products and participate and so on, but they understand our industry, they understand how the business works, and they understand the values and culture of our industry. And that was one of my concerns when I came to Saudi Arabia, because like a lot of people, 3 or 4 years ago, you would have said a traditionally very conservative culture and nation, and a very socially liberal entertainment industry or sector of the entertainment industry. And you go, Saudi Arabia, video games, how's that going to work? And in actual fact, it works perfectly because of, I think, of the very progressive, I don't mean this in a liberal way, but the very progressive thinking of leadership in His Royal Highness and the encouragement, enablement, and empowerment that we've been given at Savvy to hit the ground running, to go hard on putting points on the board, and to try to do what's impossible, which is super exciting. I see this in Esports World Cup too, where I'm privileged to sit on the Supreme Committee with His Royal Highness and many other prominent people, and constantly being encouraged to make the impossible happen.
Mm.
The fact that World Cup happened in 2024, if you'd asked anybody 15 months ago, is this possible? We would have all said, in fact, we all did say, no, 2024 is too soon. His Royal Highness said, I would like it in 2024. Please make it happen.
And you did.
And it happened.
That's amazing. I mean, I think that's a perfect place to end, to be honest, when you put everything in perspective like that. Thank you for carrying the industry forward in our country. Just hearing your story, I can't think of a better person for the job.
Thank you.
And I'll be kicking myself if I didn't ask you of this before we signed off. Have you ever been mistaken for a Hollywood actor? Because
oh my God,
I feel like I'm speaking to him.
That makes me laugh. Who was that guy who was a gangster?
That's him. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore.
Yes, I know. So when I was younger, I used to get mistaken for Donny Osmond, which actually wasn't that bad. And it's kind of cringy now, but it wasn't that bad. And then Alan Thicke for a little while. I was also okay with that. But now it's the other guy who's dead. It's like, okay, I look like a dead guy. So
Ray Liotta.
Ray Liotta. Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
I know. He's dead though.
I think if they ever wanted to make a part 2 of a movie with him, and you get a call and you have the time for it. Do you see it?
I think I need some work if I look like a dead guy. Come on.
You look like him when he was on screen. Brian, thank you for being so down to earth and sharing all the information that we asked of you on this talk, and best of luck with everything going forward. It's a super exciting space, and from strength to strength, inshallah.
Thank you very much, Mo. It's my pleasure.
My honor, my pleasure. Thank you. Amazing.
Cheers.
I couldn't resist.